I remember the exact moment my world cracked. I was sitting at the kitchen table in Montgomery, staring at a stack of letters I tried to ignore for weeks. They all had the same look, that official, cold envelope from the bank. My hands shook as I opened the first one. Your daughter has declared bankruptcy. I froze. My chest tightened. My heartbeat felt like a drum pounding in my ears. I reread the words, hoping they'd morph into something else, anything else. But no, my daughter, Jade, had filed for bankruptcy, and because I had co-signed every one of her loans, I was now on the hook for everything. Every last dime. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run upstairs and lock myself in my room and cry until I couldn't remember who I was anymore. But instead, I just sat there, letting the tears fall silently. For months, I had been the responsible one, balancing our bills, checking her credit, reminding her to pay her minimums. I had believed her promises, every "I'll pay you back, Mom," that slipped from her lips so easily. And now I was drowning in her mistakes. I could hear her laughter from her bedroom across the hall, the carefree sound that used to fill the house with life. It was cruel how normal it sounded, like she had no idea of the storm she'd left behind. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about money. This was betrayal. I flipped through the documents again, my eyes catching the total balance. My hands went numb. Every credit card, every personal loan, every missed payment, all of it now mine. I thought of the sacrifices I had made over the years, the overtime at my job, the evenings I stayed up making sure our bills were paid, just so she could live comfortably, take her trips, buy the shoes she needed. And she had thrown it all away. I tried calling her. No answer. Texts ignored. Finally, I sent a simple message, "We need to talk." Now. Still nothing. I sat back, rubbing my temples, trying to think. What would I do? I felt trapped, humiliated, and alone. I had raised her to be independent, to handle her own life, and yet here I was, left to clean up a mess she had created willingly. And then the anger hit. The deep, gnawing kind of anger that sinks into your bones. How could she be so careless? So selfish? I had trusted her completely. And she had stabbed me in the back. But as I sat there, wallowing in the shock and betrayal, a small, quiet voice inside me said, "This isn't the end. You're stronger than this. You'll figure it out." I thought about my own mother, how she taught me resilience, how she survived heartbreak and loss without ever giving up. Maybe I could channel that. Maybe I could turn this nightmare into something I could survive, maybe even thrive from. That night, I stayed awake, going over every loan, every document. I traced the payments, noted the missing amounts, and discovered the first twist: Jade hadn't just made poor financial decisions. She had been hiding other sources of money, transferring funds into accounts I hadn't known existed. It wasn't just negligence, it was deception. The next day, I called my lawyer. She was kind but firm, the type who didn't sugarcoat anything. "Mrs. Carter, you've got a rough road ahead," she said. "But there are ways to protect yourself. We can fight some of this, investigate transfers, and see if any fraud occurred." Fraud. That word echoed in my mind. Jade's actions weren't just careless, they were calculated. My own daughter had orchestrated this, leaving me to bear the weight. That's when I decided. I wasn't going to crumble under this. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. I would fight, piece by piece, uncover every lie, and hold her accountable. Little did I know, this journey would reveal secrets I never imagined, forces within my own family I had never suspected, and a truth that would shake our home to its core. And it would change me forever. The next morning, I woke up with a tight knot in my chest. Sleep hadn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those bank letters stacked on the kitchen table like tiny accusations. Each one screamed Jade's betrayal. I poured a cup of coffee, but it barely touched the burning anger in my chest. My phone buzzed, another message from my lawyer, Angela. We've started tracing the accounts. Some transactions don't add up. Call me ASAP. I gripped the phone with trembling hands. I'm on my way, I typed back. By mid-morning, I was sitting in Angela's office, the beige walls feeling tighter with every passing second. Okay, she said, flipping through a folder of papers. Here's what we know so far. You co-signed Jade's loans willingly, which makes you legally responsible. But look at this, she's been diverting money to an offshore account, withdrawing funds right after payday, making it appear she couldn't pay her debts. She's been hiding it from you. I felt like someone had shoved a knife into my stomach. She's doing this on purpose? I whispered. Angela nodded slowly. It looks that way. And some of these debts, student loans, credit cards, she took out without even telling you, knowing you'd be liable. She declared bankruptcy so you'd be stuck. I couldn't breathe. My own daughter, my Jade, had orchestrated this carefully, hiding money while letting me pay the price. When I got home, I paced the living room like a caged animal. The sunlight streaming through the blinds only made the shadows sharper, the feeling heavier. I needed answers. I needed proof. I grabbed my laptop and started digging. Old emails. Bank statements. Text messages. Anything. And then, I found it. A transfer of $5,000 into an account I had never known existed. And another. And another. The betrayal hit me in waves, like each transfer was a slap to the face. Jade hadn't just been careless, she had been deliberate, deceptive, and cold. I felt like screaming. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I paused. That would be too messy, too emotional. I needed clarity first. So I went to the last place I'd ever wanted to, was her room. I opened her laptop. Her screensaver smiled back at me, carefree, unaware. And then I saw the file named Mom1tfindout.doc. I hesitated for a second. But curiosity and fury won over. I clicked. Inside was a spreadsheet, detailed, organized, precise. Every loan I co-signed, every due date, every payment she skipped. And next to each one, the amount she siphoned to herself. I felt sick. She had planned this for months. Every promise she'd made to me, every "I'll pay you back," was a lie. The next day, I confronted her. Jade, I need to know the truth. Why didn't you tell me about the other accounts? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. Mom, it's not that big a deal. I'll pay it back eventually. Eventually? Eventually. I yelled. Do you even hear yourself? I'm paying your debts. I'm losing sleep, my savings, everything I worked for, and you call this not a big deal? Her face remained stubborn. You'll be fine. Don't stress so much. Staring at her, I realized this wasn't about money. It was about control. She had been testing me, manipulating me, and I hadn't seen it coming. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about my own mother, how she always warned me to protect myself, to recognize when someone close might use you. I had thought Jade was innocent. I had thought love made her trustworthy. I was wrong. A week later, I got a call from someone unexpected, my neighbor, Mrs. Green. She had always been fond of Jade, but there was something in her tone that day. Marissa, she said, her voice tight. I think your daughter's been taking more than you know. I froze. What do you mean? I don't know all the details, she admitted, but I noticed unusual packages coming to her apartment, deliveries that didn't make sense for her age or job. And I heard her talking on the phone about moving money around. I didn't want to get involved before, but now I think you should see this. She handed me a folder. Inside were receipts, shipping records, and some screenshots she had secretly kept, enough to confirm what I had feared. Jade had been funneling money, hiding her purchases, and creating a paper trail I hadn't known about. Mrs. Green had risked a lot just to help me. And suddenly, I wasn't alone. Later that evening, I finally got Jade alone. I held the folder from Mrs. Green on my lap. "Jade, this has to stop. I know everything." "Why?" She hesitated. Then her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know how to ask for help. I thought I could handle it all, Mom. And I panicked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I could feel my anger and heartbreak clash inside me. On one hand, the betrayal was unforgivable. On the other, there was still my daughter, scared, desperate. "I believed in you," I whispered. "I trusted you with my life. And this almost broke me." Her confession didn't fix anything, it only highlighted the depth of the mess. But it gave me a plan. I realized now that revenge wasn't about punishment. It was about uncovering the truth, exposing her manipulation, and protecting myself before any more damage could be done. The days after Jade's confession were a haze of sleepless nights, furious pacing, and quiet sobs. Every time I looked at her, I saw the girl I had raised with love and care, the one I trusted completely, and yet, I also saw the person who had orchestrated my financial nightmare. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to break something tangible instead of my heart. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't fix anything. Rage alone wouldn't give me the power to reclaim what was mine, both emotionally and financially. I started by gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Emails, bank statements, screenshots from Mrs. Green, even old loan documents that Jade had tried to hide. I spent nights cross-referencing them, connecting the dots, and documenting every deception. The more I dug, the clearer the truth became. Jade had planned this carefully, manipulating not only me but the entire family into thinking she was struggling innocently. At the same time, I battled my own guilt. Had I been too lenient? Too trusting? Had I enabled her by co-signing everything without more oversight? I hated myself for allowing her to exploit my love. But I couldn't stay in that pit of guilt forever. I had to act. One evening, as I sorted through a stack of bank statements, I noticed something strange. A small payment, labeled vaguely as consulting fees, had gone to someone named Evan Parker, a man I didn't know. Curious, I Googled him and found he was a financial consultant specializing in offshore transfers. Suddenly, it clicked. Jade hadn't just hidden money in a local account, she had been funneling it to offshore accounts, potentially even outside the reach of bankruptcy protections. My anger flared hotter than ever. She hadn't just hurt me, she had taken my trust, my savings, and humiliated me in front of the world. And yet, amidst the fury, a small spark ignited. I realized I didn't need to fight her alone. I could fight smart. I could fight strategically. I called Angela, my lawyer, and laid out my plan. "I don't just want my money back," I said firmly. "I want her to understand the gravity of this. She needs to see the consequences of her actions." Angela nodded. "We can start by challenging the bankruptcy filings, tracing the offshore accounts, and notifying the banks of potential fraud. But legally, it has to be precise. One wrong move and it could backfire." I felt a thrill I hadn't expected, the calm, focused kind that comes when a plan begins to take shape. For weeks, I became meticulous. I followed transactions, filed complaints, and even contacted the banks directly. Each revelation made my blood boil. Jade had been using her charm to keep everyone blind, while she quietly emptied accounts and built a safety net for herself. Mrs. Green became an unexpected hero in my plan. She volunteered to help monitor Jade's activities, providing screenshots and notes whenever Jade thought no one was watching. Sometimes I felt guilty for using her, but this was bigger than guilt. This was about justice. One evening, she handed me a folder thicker than anything I'd seen. "Everything I've collected over the last few months," she said. "You're going to need it." As I flipped through the documents, I realized the depth of Jade's deception. Not only had she hidden money, she had lied about her income, falsified records, and even manipulated friends into covering for her. It was a web of lies that could crush her legally and emotionally. Then came the bombshell. While digging through old emails for proof of her transactions, I found something I never expected. Jade had been hiding a secret boyfriend, Troy, who had helped her plan the entire scheme. Not only had he encouraged her to declare bankruptcy, but he had also introduced her to offshore accounts and fake consulting services to divert the money. I felt my chest tighten. Betrayal upon betrayal. She had used love as a weapon, using Troy's influence to manipulate her mother, me, while pretending to be helpless. I knew I couldn't confront them directly yet. This required patience. Precision. Revenge that would leave her stunned and unable to deny her actions. That night, I sat alone in the living room, clutching my mother's gold locket. I thought about the woman who had taught me resilience and strength, the one who had survived loss after loss and always reminded me to fight, not break. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but they weren't just from anger. They were from heartbreak, betrayal, and the weight of knowing the daughter I loved could be capable of such calculated manipulation. But somewhere deep in that grief, determination took root. I wouldn't let her win. I wouldn't let her destroy me. I would reclaim my life, my finances, and my peace of mind piece by piece. The morning I decided to act, the air in Montgomery felt heavier, charged, like the calm before a storm. I brewed coffee but barely touched it. Everything in me was focused on the steps ahead. I had evidence, allies, and a plan. And this time, I wasn't going to be passive. I started with the banks. I presented every document, the offshore transfers, falsified statements, and receipts from Jade's hidden expenses. Angela and I sat with the bank manager, laying out the pattern of deceit. "This isn't just negligence," Angela said firmly. "This is deliberate fraud, and Mrs. Carter is the victim." The bank representatives exchanged glances, their faces turning serious. One even murmured about legal investigations. It was the first victory, small but satisfying, a crack in the shield Jade had built around herself. I knew that facing Jade privately might allow her to manipulate her way out again. So, I decided to subtly escalate. With Angela's guidance, I prepared a timeline of Jade's financial missteps, including screenshots, bank statements, and evidence of Troy's involvement. I printed copies and mailed them to the credit agencies, the banks, and a few legal contacts. No emails. No text messages. Paper trails. Hard evidence. When Jade received the first notice that her bankruptcy was being questioned, her smug confidence began to crumble. I invited Jade to lunch at the small cafe near my house, a neutral space, public, yet private enough for a serious talk. She arrived, radiant as ever, unaware of the storm waiting for her. "Mom," she said, smiling, "what's this about?" I slid the folder across the table. "It's about everything," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Your bankruptcy, the hidden accounts, Troy's involvement, everything you've done to me." Her smile faltered. "Mom, I can't explain." "Explain?" I snapped. "Explain why you manipulated me, lied about money, and left me to pay for your choices?" Tears welled in her eyes, but this time I didn't let her charm sway me. I showed her every document, every transaction. The evidence was undeniable. Her face went pale. "Mom, I didn't think." "You didn't think," I echoed. "You didn't think about me, your family, or the consequences. And now you're going to see them." The next move was subtle but devastating. Using the evidence I had collected, I contacted Troy's workplace and informed them of his involvement in Jade's schemes. Within days, he faced internal investigations, leaving him unable to support Jade anymore. When Jade found out, her world began to unravel. The man who had coached her through her deceit, the one she thought she could trust, was gone. She was alone, and the consequences were closing in fast. I didn't stop at financial and social consequences. I made sure Jade understood the emotional impact of her choices. I shared with her how much I had lost: sleep, trust, peace of mind, and how I had been humiliated in front of friends and family. At first, she denied everything. Then, slowly, cracks appeared. I could see regret, fear, and guilt all fighting for control in her eyes. The same girl who had laughed so freely in her room months ago was now forced to confront the full weight of her actions. Another surprise came from within the family. My younger brother, who had always been close to Jade, came forward. He confessed that he had suspected something was wrong but didn't know how to prove it. Once he saw the evidence I had gathered, he stepped in to support me, lending credibility and emotional weight to my case. Together, we approached other family members quietly. Their reactions ranged from shock to anger at Jade, further isolating her. She had lost the network she once relied on. The final stage of my plan was legal. Angela filed motions challenging the bankruptcy claims, presenting every shred of proof. It was meticulous, exhausting work, but justice was on my side. Weeks passed, and Jade began receiving notices of disputed claims. Banks froze certain accounts, requiring full disclosure. The pressure mounted. She called me one night, voice trembling. "Mom, I didn't realize. I'm so sorry." I listened quietly. Her apology didn't erase months of betrayal, but it marked a turning point. I realized that my revenge wasn't about humiliation or cruelty. It was about reclaiming control, justice, and teaching a lesson that wouldn't be forgotten. Even as the legal and social consequences unfolded, I couldn't ignore the pain inside me. This journey had been brutal: sleepless nights, endless paperwork, and heartbreak. But it also revealed something incredible: my strength. I had faced betrayal, deceit, and manipulation from my own daughter, yet I hadn't broken. I had turned the tables, and in doing so, I had discovered an inner resilience I never knew existed. I started to rebuild my life, carefully managing finances, re-establishing boundaries, and taking back control. I even began volunteering at a local financial literacy program, hoping to help others avoid the mistakes I had suffered. Months had passed since the confrontation, the bank disputes, and the unraveling of Jade's carefully constructed life. The whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and revenge had finally settled into a quieter, though still tense, reality. I sat on the porch one warm evening, sipping tea, and reflected on everything that had happened. My hands, once shaky from stress and rage, now felt steady. I realized that the worst of betrayal wasn't the money or the lies, it was the sense of being unseen, unappreciated, and used. And I had fixed that. Jade had begun to rebuild, slowly and painfully, under the weight of the consequences she could no longer avoid. She reached out occasionally, tentative and ashamed, but I remained firm. Forgiveness was not a free pass. Trust had to be earned, and I wasn't ready to give it lightly. The banks eventually settled, some debts reversed, and my financial stability restored. More importantly, I had learned to protect myself, emotionally and practically. I had set boundaries that no one could cross, even a daughter I loved fiercely. The ordeal taught me that love without boundaries can be exploited. That even those closest to you can betray you if given the chance. But it also taught me something far more powerful: my own resilience. I had faced deception from the person I trusted most, yet I had emerged stronger, smarter, and more in control than ever before. Revenge had not been about cruelty, it had been about reclaiming what was mine and teaching hard lessons about accountability. I thought of the women I had spoken with during support groups and community meetings. So many had experienced similar betrayals, whether financial, emotional, or both. And I realized that by sharing my story, I could help others navigate the stormy waters of betrayal, regain their strength, and know that they were not alone.